Hello, I'd like to give an introduction to enterprise search. This is a fairly new kind of technology. It sort of raised its head about 2 or 3 years ago, primarily because we're holding many different kinds of information now, and the quantity of information is growing pretty well exponentially. So there's a need for enterprise search. I think a good place to start is just to look at what was happening maybe 10 or 15 years ago, because things have changed quite a lot since then. So 15 years ago, we had really two kinds of information. We had information that we stored in filing cabinets. This would be hard copies of documents. And we had our transactional data that we stored on our database. It's typically be in the form of a table. So name, address, whatever else we hold for a contact, so Joe, Fred, and the address for each of those. And that was about it. So transactional data held on a database, documents held in a filing cabinet. And if you needed to find either of those things, it was a fairly straightforward matter. But of course, over the past 10 years, things have changed quite a lot. So we now have, well, probably about half a dozen, maybe more, 9 or 10 different kinds of information. So we scan documents and hold them in electronic format. We have email. We have, more recently, social networking information in the form of blogs, wikis, microblogging. We have instant messaging. We have rich content such as graphics, sound, maybe video. We have all the office type documents, so we have word process documents, we have spreadsheets, we have presentations, so PowerPoint type presentations. And of course, on top of this, we have good old transactional data. And somehow we've got to try and make sense of all of this, because scanned documents, office documents, transactional data, emails, all of those different kinds of information may relate to a single entity, so a customer, say. So their contract may exist in a word process document. There may have been some emails flying about that are relevant to them. There will be transactional data that's relevant to them. There might be social networking data. So somehow we have to try and pull all that together. Now this has created quite a problem, and I think it's worth going over the issues that organizations face. Now it's reckoned that about 20% of the time of an information worker is spent in information search. Now it doesn't really matter whether it's 15% or 30%, it's still a lot of time. It's also reckoned that most of the time that people search for information, they don't find it. Well, having looked at the types of information that we've just considered, it's easy to see why. So we have a number of problems, inefficiencies and ineffective ways of operating that come out of this. So one is can't find. You know there's some information out there somewhere, some document that somebody's created maybe, that would be helpful, but you can't find it. So what do? You duplicate it. The work's duplicated, which is an expensive activity, unnecessary activity, and probably prone to errors, because what was originally created and what's newly created will almost certainly be different. There's another big problem. It's the not knowing what you know. Masses of work is carried out in many organizations that would be useful to lots of people, and they just don't know that somewhere in there, in the organisation, is information that would help with a new project, new initiative, some operational activity, but basically because there's no repository that allows a person to go and find all these sources of information from a single point of reference, then we simply don't know what we know. I've already mentioned mistakes. So somebody might have created a spreadsheet about some operational activity a year or so ago. Somebody wants to look at it and it can't be found, so they try to reconstruct the spreadsheet, and inevitably mistakes will be made, which then affect decisions, of course. And crowning all this is a lack of integration. Now, a lack of integration is serious because it means that the organisation is fragmented from an information point of view. And this problem's only going to get worse. We've seen the introduction of social networking over the past few years. There will inevitably be different kinds of information introduced over the next 5 or 10 years. And it's a strange thing. This whole scenario is really like organisations having their own internet, this vast repository of information that they've collected over the years, but actually no search engine, no web browser to go and look for it. And storing information and acquiring information is half the story, retrieving it is the other half of the story. And in many organisations it's an afterthought, which is clearly a mistake. So, very briefly, let's just have a look at what the options are. Well, some form of enterprise search facility is clearly needed, and there are lots of people out there offering solutions, and they really fall into about 4 broad categories. The first one is what I call traditional. A good example of this is a company called ISIS. Extraordinarily good at text-based searching. So if you've got text somewhere in an email, a social network, a word process document, a database, that product will go and find it, and it will do all kinds of levels of refined searching and categorization of information. Then we have what I might call new technologies and autonomy. It's a very good example of this. Autonomy uses something called Shannon's information theory to automatically search for meaning in content, in data. It's actually very good at it as well. It's an expensive product. I think the company's made some mistakes with its recent acquisitions, but fundamentally the product is a very good product at its core. And in fact it's even being used on voice and video files. Then what could be categorized as appliances. Google has a search appliance. It's basically just a computer that you plug into your network, and provided that it has interfaces to the data you want to get to, then it will go and find it. It's a good solution to the requirements of a medium-sized organization. I'm not so sure about large organizations. And then what I'd call integrated solutions. A small company called Simplexo offers a solution in this area. And these are fairly simple solutions. So it will go to your email, it will go to your database, it will go to your instant messaging, it will go to social databases and to documents, and it will find whatever information it can find. And the reason it's integrated is because it gets, when you install it, it integrates into your application. So let's say you're in a Oracle or SAP application or a word processing application. There's a little search box that will allow you to then go and search the whole enterprise for a piece of information. They're not as these solutions are not as powerful as some of the others I've mentioned, but they are extremely productive and user-friendly. Now, all of this is predicated on quite a lot of work, and I'm not going to go into it in detail here because I haven't got time, but metadata, data that describes data, is very important in all of this. And this leads on to things like taxonomies and ontologies and semantics, what I call the labyrinth. You may have to do this stuff, but if you do it, please, please, please be aware that you get 80% of the benefit from 20% of the effort, because it's very easy to fall into a very unproductive black hole with all this stuff. Anyway, that's all the time I have for this. So I hope that's been useful, and obviously we'll be covering much more of it in greater detail in future recordings.